Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Functionally Autoimmune. A fantastic guest on the show today. With me today, I have Mary Beth Robinson. She is a licensed chiropractor who specializes in nutrition, and she is the founder of Superpower Inc. Welcome, Mary Beth. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Brandy.
I'm so excited that you're here. And we spoke a little bit before the show on just like how excited I am for everybody to hear kind of what it is you do and the services that you provide and what's, I just can't wait to get into it because I know that people are going to just love this. But can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Superpower Inc., what exactly it is that you do?
Okay. I have had intuitive abilities since I was young. And just like most people, we've all got them, but mine were just really well developed. And I didn't know what to do with them. And so here I am, 52 years old, and I've kind of figured it out, like about 20 years ago. I'm like, oh, I would do readings for my friends and family. And I would just say, here's what I see, here's what I see. And they would say, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. None of it was weird. It was just kind of just an acknowledgement of, oh, you know what, I was kind of thinking that, or I had that same concern.
Yeah.
And so I did a session with a friend of mine, and I said, wow, you have a guardian angel. Like I grew up Methodist. We don't really talk about guardian angels, and I'm like, wow, you really had one. And so I said, I'm just going to talk for your guardian angel. And so, in first person, because it's just easier than
Yeah.
saying, they said this, they said that. It just takes too much time. So I just did it. And then I thought, wow, that's interesting. And through all of that work, I realized that I could tune in with people and see their essence. And the reason that like the guardian angel work is even, I even mention it, is because I look at guardian angels like they vibrate at our same frequency. They know us. They know what we need. They know what challenges we face. And so when I started to do that, I started to be able to just tune in with somebody. I did that for you yesterday,
Yeah.
and just pick up their energy and pick up that wisdom.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I tune in with people. It sounds strange. And I do best when I don't know anything about the person and I've never met them. I'd never met Brandy. We had talked briefly, but nothing personal. So I didn't know anything about you. And, but it's best if I can just get the information. And so what it boils down to is that I see people's essence, like what they absolutely were made for.
Yeah.
And a superpower is not like a tool. Tools are like, wow, for me, I'm really good at organizing and planning and thinking ahead and, putting everything together. But my real superpower is that I see other people's superpowers.
Yeah.
And organization helps me do that. It helps me actually organize my life so that I can do it for people. And most of the time we think of, oh, well, my superpower must be what I'm good at. Well, we're good at a lot of things.
Right.
But if you take the essence, like one thing you wouldn't give up, that's your superpower. And it just helps, as you and I were just talking about, it helps when someone else sees it
Yeah.
because we're so familiar with our faults. We're very comfortable talking about our faults. We're like, yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I should do this. I should do this. I could have done that better. Anyone who's a parent certainly knows. They're clear where they're not perfect, but because our children so generously point that out to us.
Right.
Um, but we're comfortable with that. But we don't usually speak to each other in terms of, wow, acknowledgement of really what's there at our essence.
Right.
And so that's what I feel like I do is I acknowledge and I delve into what people are amazing at.
Yeah.
And when we get that sense, then we can tap into it even more. It just kind of actually subconsciously just changes our trajectory. We're like, oh, I do know myself that to be that. And even unconsciously, we start doing things differently. We think about ourselves differently. It it helps us be more creative, all that kind of stuff. when we just hear it out loud.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And, like you mentioned, we had never met before, a couple of emails really just for planning this meeting.
Mhm.
No personal things. And you did a reading for me yesterday and it was fantastic. I mean, it was spot on. I can't even explain like how I was reading through it and thinking, oh my gosh, it's like she's known me my entire life. It's just the craziest thing. And I think it's fantastic. And like you said, it was really great to hear those things coming from someone else, but also coming from someone else who doesn't know me personally. It's not like it was a
Yeah.
family member or a parent or a
Mhm.
spouse that was saying,
Right.
oh, hey, you're these things. This is from someone who doesn't know you personally saying these
Mhm.
things about you. And you're like, oh, wow. So there's a lot of validation in that. And it's really great to hear. And so once you do these readings with people, what kind of are your next steps for that? Do you kind of help people learn how to utilize that knowledge or directions that they can go? And what typically do people do once they kind of learn their superpower?
Yeah, what we do is I usually have follow-up sessions with people because, it's one thing to be like, "Oh my gosh, that's really me.
Yeah,
That's so cool." But often then we're faced with, "Well, what's next?" Like, "Well, what do I do with this?" And so every session that I have with people, we basically just kind of uncover what's there.
yeah,
And the differences they're so subtle. I mean, they're exciting because it's like, wow, that's really, really neat.
yeah.
But the real work isn't just living with that. And
Mhm.
so we just kind of keep uncovering more about your superpower and what are the nuances of it, what does it look like, and because um I totally lost my train of thought. I just had an amazing idea. Hold on. I'm sure I'll get back to it. but um but okay, yes, there are blocks that we have to expressing our superpower.
Yeah,
One of the things that I used to say is I used to call them your shortcuts. But you know what? We are so programmed that shortcuts are bad. We don't want to take any shortcuts.
yeah.
And so in life, we discount what we do because it's easy,
Mhm.
and we miss how powerful and how good it is and how right it is. Like when I went into chiropractic, there are all sorts of ways to diagnose what's going on and everything. And of course, there's a great depth of knowledge that you need to have.
Sure.
But what a lot of chiropractors do once they've been in practice a long time, someone can walk in the door and they're like, yep, your left SI is out, like they
Right.
just know, like, okay, your lumbar spine is totally stressed and stuck.
Yeah.
But I could do that from the very beginning. But because I thought it should be harder, I relied on all these other stuff. And and then I didn't use my natural gifts. So I
Right.
had some chiropractors kind of sit me down and say, okay, you need to, yes, you've got all the medical knowledge, you've got all the experience, but you really, in anything, you need to be using your gifts.
Yeah.
And that was extremely helpful. And so I could start using them in my everyday practice. So all that being said, it is sometimes so difficult to use our superpowers because we discount them. We're like, it's not that big of a deal. Who can't do it? Like people say, how do you tune in? And my response is, how do you not tune in? It's just right there. Oh my gosh, I tune in so much, it's a problem. Like I actually have to like not tune in.
Yeah.
So because it's just natural. Like I talk to people who can draw, it blows my mind that
Right.
anyone could like draw something and like tattoo it on a body. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
That is like so foreign to me. Or ice a cupcake. I cannot ice a cupcake pretty
Yeah.
if my life
I'm with
depended on it.
you.
Right. I'm like, no, Sophia, or my daughter, I'm like, you're gonna have to deal with it. Your mom makes ugly, pastries because that's how it's just gonna be. I can't do it. But but people who are good at it, they just do it. It's
Yeah.
easy and they love it. It's not only that they can do it, but they love to do it. And it's like their act of service, their act of contribution. So it takes a little bit of work to continue to give yourself permission to give voice to your superpower.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we kind of talked about that a little bit before the show as well. So I'll just kind of divulge a little bit of information that you gave to me is that, I mentioned this to you, growing up, I was a very quiet person. I was someone who just kind of wanted everyone to be happy, was kind of like this people pleaser, didn't really speak out a lot.
Mhm.
And so, you had mentioned that you noticed that I had done a lot of work on, and my superpower, by the way, is nurturing, just to kind of keep everybody up on what's going on. But you had kind of mentioned that you saw that I had done a lot of work around that, which I completely understand and agree, and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you saw that. So what type of, I guess, what do people kind of look for, or what should they think about when thinking about doing work around their superpower, or really embracing that, or what can that look like for people?
Absolutely. I would say having worked with so many people, one of the things that people say, well, what are you really good at? And then you write this list of like 50 things or whatever. And what I would say is absolutely write that list, but make it long enough that you really start to get into the depth of what you can do. Like, Brandy, I imagine that once you list like all the things you're good at and stuff, that you would finally get into, I care about people.
Mhm.
I love people. I love it when the light comes on
Yeah.
and they see who they can be. And, that's you. That's totally you. And, and people for you are like a puzzle. You're like, okay, let's take that out. Let's take that out. That doesn't fit. Now
Yeah.
let's get into it. Let's dive in. And
Yeah.
that's what you love.
Mhm.
So, for looking at for our superpower, we really want to get to what we love.
Mhm.
And not just like for me, I'm a good decorator. Like I'm trying to think of, I wear comfortable clothes. I can find comfortable clothes. I
Yeah.
can also find great deals,
Right.
like at stores. I can do all that. But when I get into what is it that I really, really love,
Mhm.
it is, whenever I do a reading, I always ask, did this make sense for you?
Yeah.
Because I don't just do it and I'm like, okay, it's done. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
I do it to make a difference. Like I love that moment when people are gotten, when they're like, you can tell, it's kind of like they tear up a little bit, or they're just kind of like, like, oh, but
Yeah.
it's like, it's so special when somebody really gets you,
Right.
it's such a gift. And so I love that. And so if you make your list specific enough to be like, here's what I love, here's what is makes me super, super happy,
Mhm.
then you can start to get into your superpower.
Yeah.
And then you ask yourself, okay, you get it down to, like 10 things. And then you figure out what's the one thing I would not give up.
Mhm.
And for me, it is because I ask myself, I love to write, I love to speak, I love to coach,
Yeah.
I love to organize. I mean, I love those things.
Yeah.
But I also love to tune in. And if I had to only keep one, it would be tuning in,
Yeah.
because everything else is something I use to convey what I tune in and get.
Right.
Right. Because we're all given a certain amount of tools that make sense for us.
Right.
Like it's great for me to organize because I can just say, okay, here are the steps. You
Mhm.
know, I can express things in a way people can understand them.
Right.
I talk at a level I have that is understandable, because I don't want to talk over anyone's head. I don't want to say things that they don't understand. I want to connect with that person, and all I care about is getting the message across.
Right.
So I can talk in many different ways, but that's the tool I have. And it makes sense. Like for you with nurturing, it makes sense that you are also in the medical field. You have that knowledge. You have put yourself in, so you've got a scientific background, you've got a brain that works. But when you are working with patients, you have the ability to encourage them and to know how they feel and to understand what they're going through. You have a lot of empathy.
Yeah.
You can feel that. And you've got a really optimistic outlook in life. Like you can do it. You can
Yeah.
do it. Not everybody has that. That's one of your tools. And that's one of the things you have to have in order to be such like an evolved nurturer.
Right. Yeah. And it's
So
interesting that you say that too, because I do feel like I am really good at kind of tuning in on how people are feeling. Like whether they've
absolutely.
asked me to or not, I can usually tell if
Right.
someone's sad, upset, whatever. I'm pretty
Yeah.
good at that. And so
Yeah.
like you mentioned before, I feel like who can't do that? Of course, everybody can just look at
I
somebody and be
know.
like,
I know sometimes like with people, I'm like, read the room. Oh my gosh, how do you not tell that this person's super sad?
right.
They're like, oh, I didn't know. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I forgot. Like that's not what everybody can do. And
Yeah.
it's okay. But
Right.
yeah, like you've got all those abilities. You can tune in with people, you can speak to them in a way that they can hear.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would do at home alone when you've got some time. Write out all the stuff that you are good at and that you really love, but write long enough, write longer than once you've written the last possible thing you can write 20 more things, because then you'll kind of get into the real stuff, the deep stuff that we really don't think about.
Yeah.
But when we get to it, we're like, oh, I love that. I do love that.
Mhm.
I wish I could do more of that. And then pick the thing that you wouldn't give up. What is so you that you couldn't relinquish, because then you wouldn't be you anymore.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. And it sounds like such a great practice. I mean, for figuring out what you're great at, but also for just kind of, I think, self-reflection of like, look at all these wonderful things I'm great at. Look at all these things
Right.
I can do and that I love to do. I think it's a great
Right.
reflective practice.
It is. And you know what I think is so neat, after having done this for so many people all over the world in all sorts of different professions, or no professions at all, or young, old, whatever, is that when we get right down to it, there is a part of us that wants to be of service, that
Mhm.
wants to make a contribution.
Yeah.
And I think that's so central to our essence. We're all here, put here at this time for a specific purpose.
Mhm.
And when we get right down to it, we want to make a difference. We want to make a contribution. And I think being in touch with that is so powerful, because there is just no better feeling than being able to acknowledge people for who they are and to have them get it. I'm like, okay, my job is done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, I did what I came here to do,
Yeah.
because I know that will grow on itself.
Mhm.
But it makes a difference. And it makes me have a lot of faith in humanity, because we all have that. We all, and it doesn't have to be so altruistic. I mean, artists love when people love their art.
Yeah. Right.
Writers love it when people read their writing and understand it, and it makes a difference for them.
Yeah.
It may seem like this isn't important, but if you're out doing a sport, and people who are doing that same sport see you and they're like, wow, look at the joy you have, look at what you've created, look at how you do that. That makes a difference.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So I have to ask, because
Mhm.
I'm just curious,
Mhm.
is do you typically see that when you're doing a reading for someone, do you find that they usually have already gravitated towards a career or a lifestyle or a field that kind of resonates with that inner superpower that they don't even know that they have really yet?
Yeah.
Or do you find that there are a lot of people who have gone a different direction and maybe that's why they're unhappy with their careers or with things? I mean, how have you seen that kind of play out?
That is really one of the best questions I've ever been asked, because really, really, I am not kidding. Because what's the first thing we think of? Oh, when I get clear on my superpower, then I'll know what to do for a living.
Yeah.
It corresponds with this career. It may or it may not.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say is there's always room for us to express our superpower, no matter what.
Yeah.
But I find that people are usually in two categories. They're doing something that really is a great fit, or they're doing something that's a horrible fit
Yeah.
and that keeps them from expressing their superpower. So both. Like with you, you're a great fit for what you do, but you're also doing, these other things
Yeah.
that are probably an even better fit.
Right.
But you're not doing something counter to what you're doing. Like for me, if I were in, I have done sales with, medical stuff, but I always just said, what do you need?
Yeah.
Let me get you what you need, because I can't sell, because I wouldn't want anyone to buy something that is not going to work for them.
Yeah.
So, and actually that really makes me a good salesperson. So it's worked out, but it's not really a great fit for me, just because I'm not creative. I'm not, doing Superpower Inc. gets me out of bed every morning. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, let's go play.
Yeah.
So, usually people know when they're in the wrong career. And as you and I had talked about before the podcast started, that's where a lot of illness comes from. Like I have this wonderful business coach who used to have a career that it was just this like kind of Wall Street kind of thing. And she was like, I hated it, and I would never have given it up unless I got deathly ill. And
Yeah.
she had to be down enough time where she realized, I don't want to go back. It's going to kill me. It literally is going to kill me. So the thing that I would never say is, okay, now that you know your superpower, quit your job and
Yeah.
go, follow your bliss. And I mean, follow your bliss is great, but I'm not sure that it's the best advice in the world. I think once we start tuning in with our superpowers, it's kind of like this gradual, we're going this way and we kind of gradually just go this way. And I've read so many things. Shackleton, I read a book about the Shackleton adventure to Antarctica, and called Endurance. And it was an amazing book. But he said, one of his quotes was, once we really committed, once we knew we were going, all sorts of things happened for us that we could have never planned. Things just fell in place. Like in the most, we got the right people, we got all the right things, we got the right passage. And so I feel like that's how life is. You do some internal work and you may not see it today or tomorrow, but like in a week or 2 weeks or 3 months, you see, I've been thinking about this, and I've kind of always wanted to do it. And maybe I'll talk to somebody about it. You'll start to naturally express that superpower much easier. But don't do anything drastic.
Right.
I wouldn't, unless you can afford it.
Right. Yeah.
If you got,
we're not condoning quitting your job.
right, right. Because what gets in the way is, how am I going to feed my family?
Yeah.
And then your brain is totally somewhere else. But if speaking of doing the work, if you keep looking at it, and I think one of the most powerful things you can do is speak it, because I had to learn to say, I tune in with people and I see their essence and I explain it to them. That's what I do. That's my job.
Yeah.
That's it. Like everything surrounds that. That's why when I do podcasts, I love to do readings for the people who are, doing the podcast, because I'm like, marketing is not my thing. I'm like, can I just do readings? Can I just do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Can I
and
just
I
have
do.
a
I mean,
superpower?
right. And I have to say, I mean, you guys can't see the reading that was done for me, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit here, but I mean, it wasn't like a sentence or two. It wasn't like, oh, by the way, you're nurturing and you like helping people. Like it was like,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very extensive, long write-up that has a lot of information about yourself in it, about kind of like what you like to do and what you would be good at. But like as you mentioned before, and I think we talked about this prior to starting the podcast actually, is that there's a positive and a negative to your superpower. So that is included as well. Like be careful of these things. So can you talk about that a little bit about kind of the other side of knowing your superpower and
Absolutely. And it's so great because it's really, really important. Um, with our superpower, there is kind of the juvenile way of looking at it, the young kids way of looking at it. And I don't want to make it seem bad because it's where we all start.
Mhm.
And then but by the time that most people really get what their superpower is, they're more of an adult
Yeah.
and they've already kind of like taught themselves, yeah, that doesn't work out very much. So I'm not going to do that.
Mhm.
But, and then there's the really advanced, evolved way to look. Every power we have can be used for negative or for positive. People who are super charismatic, they can lead people. They can be like a Martin Luther King Jr.,
Mhm.
or they can be, a cult leader.
Right.
Either way, they're using their superpower,
Mhm.
but they're expansive in one way, like let's talk about freedom for people, or let's just control people.
Right.
And that's a really extreme example, but like for nurturers, the possibility is that you can nurture everyone else and not yourself. You can do only what you think other people need and never learn to have your voice.
Yeah.
And you can put your needs in, or their needs in front of yours, and you can kind of remain stuck in this role where you never feel appreciated too.
Yeah.
And that's sad. You don't want to live that kind of life. But if you appreciate yourself and you acknowledge yourself and you know the power of what you do, and then you get wins, like you get fed as you see people being nurtured or experience people being nurtured. Like for you, you love that. Like when people start to be like, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I got it. Like things are working out. Like I said this thing to my husband that I never said to him. And he was so appreciative that I said it because that makes sense to him. And he was always wondering, and or whatever,
Yeah.
it that is your payback,
Mhm.
like, and that you get to be who you really are, and you get to see it making a difference. I mean, it seems so weird because we're in a materialistic society that's like, and I'm not saying don't make plenty of money, I'm not saying that at all, but really we don't get that thrill from making money. I
Yeah.
mean, we may for just a little bit, but then, it's really just a tool that we can use to express ourselves bigger and better, if we use it that way. But that's why I always want feedback from my readings. I'm just like, that's how I get paid. You know what I mean? Like, in addition to monetarily, but that's really the stuff that I love and that's thrilling to me. So, when we're doing it in an evolved manner, and we can tell because we feel good and the other person feels good. We're not expecting something from somebody else. We don't need that external validation. That's not to say that there's not it's a respectful relationship,
Yeah.
rather than I'm putting everything in and the other person is just expecting me to do the work.
Mhm.
That's not an even trade.
Right.
If we're both doing the work together, if we're both, helping each other up the ladder, that's a healthy way to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I loved that. I love that you included those things in the reading as well. Like, and it seems, it seems sort of like common sense. Like, you're a nurturer, so don't, spend all of your time nurturing people. Look at yourself too. But also, it's like you said, it's things that we don't, as a person who's a nurturer, it's things that I don't always think about. Like, I have to actually actively think about, okay, what have I done for myself lately? Like, what I need to do something to, like, I mean,
Right.
it's actually an active conversation I have to have with myself.
Yeah.
It's not something that
Mhm.
just kind of happens. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's where some of that work comes in, with trying to, counteract the negative side of your superpowers. It's an active kind of, I
It
feel like
is.
you have to be involved.
I know. I think that's a really great way to say that. I mean, I tend to be a real giver. And in my life, I noticed that when I started to develop my superpower, I also evolved as a person. And it was so much easier for me to say, you know what, I would love to do that, but I really have some work to do.
Yeah.
Like I've got this and this, or I really need some rest. So I'm
Mhm.
going to just take that. And those are, I think, things that as we go along and as we say those things, we get better and better at them.
Mhm.
Brandy, have you ever noticed that you're like, wow, that's something that 10 years ago I never would have done. And look, I just did it kind of automatically.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's good. And that's how we learn, because we're like, there's a certain quality to, oh, I have been here before and
Mhm.
I just did it again.
Yeah.
Okay. This doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel honoring. It's not honoring to myself. It's not honoring to them. Oh my gosh.
Mhm.
And we learn to have an aversion to that. And when we do, that's a good thing too. So
Yes.
we're leading ourselves, like you're consciously leading yourself into a way to nurture yourself. And you're probably doing unconscious work for that, but you're also not only going toward your superpower, but you're like, I'm not going to go away from it either. You're moving, but you're kind of getting rid of the stuff that says, no, come back, come
Yeah.
back. So, because it doesn't feel good,
Mhm.
I don't know, that I know there are some people that I've worked with, very few, but some in the past who have been like, well, you said this. And I'm like, okay, okay, this is your work. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, you
Right.
don't get to come back
Yeah.
and be like, well, I tried this. And I'm like, no, this
Yeah.
is about you
Right.
working on understanding yourself. You
Right.
have to do the work.
Right.
I can help you. I can give you a boost up, but this is about you. And of course, there are sometimes people in our lives are like, you do the work, you do it for me.
Mhm.
And it's so good for us to be able to say, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like, you know what, if I could do it, I would,
Right.
but that's not how it works. So I'm not going to do that. And you are going to learn how strong you are and
Right.
how capable you are. You don't need me to do the work, that kind of stuff. So it's, once you've seen it, then you can be like, not this time.
Yeah.
Like I used to be okay with that, but now I'm not, you
Right.
know. So, but it's really about just growing internally and just subtly changing that trajectory.
Yeah.
Instead of going this way, which is really not, it's fine, but it's not that great. We just kind of turn, and then we may not notice at first that we've really gone off another way.
Yeah.
But in several weeks, several months, we realize, wow, I really quickly, there's an example of, actually, this is my sister, and she loves to cook. And so I did a reading for her years ago, and she's amazing. But I said, wow, you like to cook. Cooking's great, but you really like to provide a space for people to be taken care of and
Mhm.
to be contributed to. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's why you cook.
Yeah.
Like, that's the essence of why. And I said, cooking is just a vehicle for you. It's not your thing, like that you want to do with your whole life. It's just a vehicle for you to take care of people.
Mhm.
So then Lisa had gone into real estate, And guess what she does? She provides a space for
Yep.
people to be like taken care of, and to be, that's perfect for them. And she brings that to her real estate business, and she's amazing because that really is what she cares about, is like, let's get you into a place that you really love. Let me take care of you through the process. Let me make you feel welcome. Let me guide you through, because some of it's scary, some of it's confronting, and she's super good at it.
Yeah.
Just because, but she didn't go from like, I would like to cook, let's go into real estate.
Yeah.
She was kind of like, oh, but she started to put that superpower into her everyday life and realized, real estate is a great fit for me,
Yeah.
because I would do anything where I could use my superpower.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's such a great example. I love that. And really that sounds so fitting for her and for what she loves to do, to kind of help people find a space that they love. And
Right. And
I mean, yeah.
right. And I don't even know that it's consciously what she thinks about all the time. She just does it.
Yeah.
She is like, when people use her as a realtor there, or hire her, or whatever people say, are working with her. Whenever she starts working with people, they're just like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, she's got it covered. She knows what she's doing. And I love that, because it's just so natural. I don't even know that she would say, well, this is what but she just realized it, and she really internalized it. And then that's who she was. Like,
Yeah.
of course I would take care of people. And when people meet her, they're just like, oh my gosh, you'd be great at that. Like, if I ever need a realtor, you're one of the ones I would consider, just because she just exudes it.
Right.
And so there are conscious things we can do, but I think also sometimes when we're so powerfully gotten and seen, then we just kind of start to become that.
Yeah.
We don't block it anymore. We just embrace it.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you can work on the conscious level and the subconscious level. And I think that really is the best way to do it, is to do it in both ways.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that so much. I could literally talk about this all day because I find it so fascinating and wonderful. But I want to make sure that we have some time for you to share where people can find you,
Yeah.
if they want to work with you, your contact information, all of that. So where can people find you?
Yes, I am at superpowerinc.org. So it's INC, superpowerinc.org. And there's also a Superpower Inc. Power company, I think, in New Jersey. So,
So don't
so
go to them.
right. They're not going to help you with your superpower.
Yeah.
But if you put Mary Beth Robinson also, or Mary Beth, you'll get to the right place. And for people who are followers of you, Brandy, if they sign up to just be on my email list and get, I'll be teaching courses and things like that, just to, you know, somebody could do it on their own time.
Yeah.
And I'll send them a little, like 4 or 5 line insight into who they are.
I
So
love
I'll do
that.
that for them. So yeah, but it's and I've made, I think, my price is very affordable and something that's really doable and good to follow up with. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And thank you for that offer. I think so many people should go and sign up for the email list so that you can get your reading and get some information. I think it's really, I mean, I know for me, just, we talked about this before. For me, just reading that and realizing that it sounded just like me. And it's super validating and powerful to have, someone, a stranger, someone that, that haven't had a conversation with about your life, or tell you these things that are super personal about you. There's something really powerful and validating about it. And so I really encourage all of you to reach out to Mary Beth and at least sign up for the email list or work with her. I think it's really great what you're doing.
Oh, thanks, Brady. I appreciate it. And it was super fun to do your reading. It
Oh,
really
thank
was.
you. It was a
Sometimes it's hard.
lot.
Sometimes it's hard
Yeah.
because it's easier when people are really self-aware. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or at least kind of self-aware.
Right. Yeah.
Right. when they're not, it's hard.
Well, I'm glad it was as enjoyable for you as it was for me. I
Oh,
found
it was. I mean, I literally sat down and I was just like, da, 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 send. Okay. Because it was just it was a great flow. And it's interesting. Every reading is different. It's what you need to hear, what you need to be acknowledged for, what you need to see and remember. Every reading is completely different. No two readings are alike. There's
yeah,
no like basic,
right.
there's no basic template.
It's so amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show and for what you're doing. And thank you everyone for listening. And again, I hope that you reach out. I'm going to add all of Mary Beth's contact information into the show notes as well, so that you can easily access those things there as well. And thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Mary Beth, for joining us today.
Thanks, Brandy.